The blaring siren of an ambulance tore through the cold Buffalo night, its red and blue lights reflecting in the puddles along Main Street. Mike Thompson watched as the vehicle sped past, his chest tightening with the memory of another night, 3 years ago, when he had been inside a similar ambulance, holding his mother's hand as she struggled for every breath. That night had marked the beginning of his fall. Now, huddled in his makeshift shelter between two abandoned buildings, Mike pulled out the damp newspaper he had found earlier. The headline jumped out at him. Josh Allen leads Bills to playoffs with historic performance. A bitter smile flickered across his lips as his fingers traced the photo of his old best friend, frozen in the perfect moment of a spectacular throw. "You did it, brother," he murmured to himself, his voice hoarse from the cold and lack of use. "You really did it." The irony of his situation wasn't lost on him. Here he was, sleeping on the streets of the city where his childhood best friend had become a football legend. The same Josh Allen he had spent hours training with on the dusty field at Firebaugh High School. The same skinny kid everyone said was too small, too inexperienced, too much of a dreamer to ever make it to the NFL. Mike closed his eyes, letting the memories wrap around him like a warm blanket. It was September 2014, and the California sun was beating down on the Firebaugh High practice field. Most of the players had gone home, but 2 teenagers remained, pushing through the heat. "One more time," Josh insisted, sweat dripping down his face. "I need to hit this throw." Mike adjusted his worn-out gloves and took off on the route again. Deep diagonal, sharp cut to the right. The movement had to be crisp, the timing perfect. The ball cut through the air like a missile, landing in Mike's hands as if it had been magnetically pulled there. "See that?" Mike shouted, holding the ball high. "That's the arm of an NFL quarterback." The other players laughed at the idea. Even their coach, though supportive, gently suggested that Josh set his sights on smaller schools, more realistic goals. But Mike saw something different. He saw the fire in Josh's eyes, the almost supernatural precision in his throws, the way he read the field as if watching it in slow motion. "One day," Mike used to say as they walked home after practice, "I'll be sitting in a massive stadium watching you do exactly this against the best in the country." A distant rumble of thunder pulled Mike back to the present. The rain was picking up again, seeping through new gaps in his makeshift shelter. He moved quickly to protect his most prized possession, a battered backpack containing the last photographs of his mother and a few keepsakes from high school. Marie Thompson had been a force of nature. She had raised Mike alone after his father walked out on them, working 2 jobs to keep a roof over their heads and food on the table. She never complained, never let the exhaustion show. Her smile had been a beacon of hope, even on the hardest days. "You have a special gift, son," she always told him. "It's not just about catching a football, it's about seeing the best in people, about believing in them when no one else does." Then came the diagnosis: pancreatic cancer, advanced stage. The doctor spoke in terms of months, maybe weeks. Mike had just started his freshman year at a state college, attending on a partial scholarship. Dropping out wasn't a difficult decision. His mother needed him. The medical bills piled up at a terrifying speed. Insurance covered only a fraction of the costs. Mike worked 3 jobs, waiter by day, security guard by night, rideshare driver on weekends. He barely slept, but he refused to complain. His mother was fighting a battle far harder than his own. Between shifts, he sat by her hospital bed, sharing updates about Josh. The NFL draft was approaching, and every analyst predicted Josh would be a first-round pick. "See, Mum," he would say, showing her articles on his old, cracked phone. "I always knew. I always told you he'd make it." Marie would smile, even through the pain. "You've always had that gift, Mickey," she whispered, "seeing greatness in people before they see it themselves." She passed away on a rainy Thursday, just like this one. Mike held her hand until the very end, promising her that he would be okay, that he would find his way. But the debt was a mountain too steep to climb. First, the apartment was gone, then the car. Keeping jobs became nearly impossible without an address or transportation. The downward spiral was swift and unforgiving. In just a few months, Mike Thompson, once a promising athlete and college student, became just another nameless face on the streets of Buffalo. Shame kept him from reaching out for help. How could he explain his situation to old friends? How could he admit that he had failed so completely? At first, he tried to keep a routine. He woke up early, searched for jobs, did his best to stay clean using public restrooms. But with every closed door, every dismissive glance, every freezing night, his determination eroded. The worst part wasn't the cold, the hunger, or the loneliness. It was watching Buffalo Bills games through the glass of electronic store windows, seeing Josh Allen become a living legend, knowing he was so close yet so far from the best friend he once had. Sometimes Mike caught himself rehearsing what he'd say if he ever ran into Josh. "Hey, remember me? Your old training partner?" But the words always died in his throat. How could he burden someone who had worked so hard to get where he was? On his darkest nights, when the cold of Buffalo seeped into his bones, Mike clung to his memories like a shipwrecked man holding onto a scrap of wood. He remembered the endless throws on the Firebaugh field, the shared laughter, the promises made under the California sun. Inside his small, tattered photo album, one picture stood out above all others. Him and Josh, after the state championship final, arms around each other's shoulders, wide smiles, the whole world ahead of them. On the back of the photo, a handwritten note, "To my best receiver and best friend. One day we'll look at this picture and remember where it all started. Josh." The rain grew heavier, dripping through the gaps in his tarp. Mike adjusted his belongings, shielding the precious album. The temperature was dropping fast, and he knew tonight would be another brutal one. "Tomorrow will be different," he whispered to himself, a ritual he repeated every night. "Tomorrow I'll find a way." He had no idea that the tomorrow he had been waiting for was closer than he thought. He didn't know that within 24 hours, a black Range Rover would pull up on that very street and his life would change forever. As the night stretched on in Buffalo, two lives continued down drastically different paths. One, a star quarterback preparing for another big game. The other, his former best friend fighting to survive another cold night. But fate had its own plans to reconnect those diverging roads. Mike finally drifted into sleep, lulled by the sound of the rain and dreams of better days. Little did he know, the universe was about to offer him a second chance, not just for himself, but for a friendship that time had never truly erased. The next 24 hours would change everything. But for now, on the silent streets of Buffalo, Mike Thompson was just another homeless man trying to survive one more cold night, carrying only the memories of a life that felt like it belonged to someone else. Dawn would bring more than just a new day. It would bring an encounter that would prove that some friendships are too strong to be broken by distance, time, or circumstance. The deafening roar of the Bills' stadium still echoed in Josh Allen's ears as he drove through the snow-covered streets of Buffalo that December morning. Another spectacular win. Another step closer to the dream of the Super Bowl. And yet, something felt off. A persistent nagging feeling that even at the peak of his success, something important was missing. The radio played softly, an old song that instantly transported him back to his Firebaugh days. The same song that used to play in Mike Thompson's beat-up pickup truck as they practiced pass after pass on their high school field. Mike. It had been years since Josh had really thought about him. his first receiver, his best friend, the first person who truly believed he could make it to the NFL. The traffic light turned red, forcing him to stop. Josh drummed his fingers on the Range Rover's steering wheel, his mind drifting to those golden years of youth. That's when he saw something or someone that made his heart stop for a second. At first, he didn't want to believe it. The man sitting on the sidewalk, wrapped in layers of tattered clothing, looked like just another homeless person trying to survive Buffalo's brutal winter. But something about his profile, the way he held his shoulders, it triggered an alarm deep in Josh's memory. "No way," Josh muttered, leaning forward in his seat. A loud honk snapped him back. The light had turned green. Without hesitation, Josh pulled over, ignoring the irritated gestures from the drivers behind him. His heart pounded like he was about to step onto the field for the most important game of his life. He approached slowly, each step bringing more certainty. The man on the sidewalk kept his head down, a makeshift cardboard sign resting against his legs, asking for help. Josh stopped just a few feet away, his voice barely above a whisper. "Mike!" The man froze. For a moment that felt like an eternity. Nothing moved. Then slowly he looked up. Even beneath the exhaustion, beneath the years of struggle etched into his face, his eyes were the same eyes that had once reflected an unshakable faith in Josh's potential. "Josh!" Mike's voice was hoarse, cracked. I didn't want you to see me like this." Josh felt his knees go weak. Without a second thought, he sat down, right there on the sidewalk, ignoring the stares from passing strangers who recognized the Bills' star quarterback. "What happened, Mike? How did you—" His words faltered. "How do you ask your best friend how he ended up on the streets?" Mike tried to smile, but it came out as something far more painful. "It's a long story, Josh. One I'm not exactly proud to tell." "I've got time," Josh replied, shrugging off his heavy jacket and draping it over his friend's shoulders. "All the time in the world." In the minutes that followed, Mike told his story, his mother's illness, the crushing medical debt, the downward spiral that had landed him here. Each word cut into Josh like a knife. Where was he when his best friend needed him most? "Why didn't you call me?" The question slipped out before Josh could stop it. Mike looked away, watching the snow start to fall. "You were living your dream, Josh, our dream. I saw you on TV, making history. How could I just show up and dump my problems on you?" The words hit Josh like a blindside tackle. Mike had suffered in silence, just to avoid being a burden. The same guy who had always put everyone else first. "Come with me," Josh said, standing and offering his hand. "Josh, you don't have to—" "This isn't charity, Mike. This is family. You've always been my family." What followed was a true testament to the power of friendship. Josh didn't just offer a roof and a meal, he dedicated himself to helping Mike rebuild his life from the ground up. First came the basics, a warm hotel room, new clothes, a full medical checkup. Josh pulled every string he had, setting up appointments with the best doctors and therapists in Buffalo. The physical transformation was just the beginning. "You always saw the best in me," Josh said one night, as he helped Mike prepare for his first job interview in years. "Now it's my turn to return the favor." The road to recovery wasn't easy. There were setbacks, moments of doubt, nights when Mike nearly gave up. The trauma of living on the streets doesn't disappear overnight. But Josh was always there, not as a celebrity doing charity, but as a friend keeping an old promise. "Remember when you told me I'd be the greatest quarterback this country has ever seen?" Josh asked during one of their long talks. "You believed in me when no one else did. Now it's my turn to believe in you." Word of their stories spread through the team. Other Bills players got involved, offering support and opportunities. Mike, with his natural talent for connecting with people, landed a job in the Bills marketing department. His first project? A program to help Buffalo's homeless community, using his own experience to create real change. It's not just about shelter or food, Mike explained in meetings. It's about restoring dignity, about showing people they're not alone. The initiative, called Second Chance, quickly became a model for other NFL teams. Mike had taken his pain and turned it into purpose. 1 year after that fateful encounter at the stoplight, Josh and Mike sat in the Bills' stadium office, watching the snow fall over the field. Mike, now the director of the Bills' community outreach program, sat confidently in a well-fitted suit, a world away from the man Josh had found on the streets. "You know what's funny?" Mike said, spinning his coffee cup. "When I was homeless, I used to dream that one day things would get better. But I never imagined it would be you, that skinny kid from Firebaugh, who would change my life." Josh chuckled, thinking back to those dusty high school fields. "And I never imagined I'd find my best friend like that. Guess the universe has a funny way of bringing the right people back together." The Second Chance program had already helped over 200 people find their way off the streets. Each success story felt like a personal victory for Mike, proof that his suffering hadn't been in vain. "You know what my mum always said?" Mike asked softly. "She always said I had a gift for seeing the best in people. I think she'd be proud of how we're using that gift now." Josh nodded, picturing Marie Thompson's warm smile. "She's proud, Mike. Wherever she is, she's proud." Their story became more than a redemption tale. It became a symbol of hope, a reminder that no one is ever too lost to be found, too broken to be made whole again. And in Buffalo on cold winter nights, people still talk about the day Josh Allen stopped at that traffic light, not just about the pass that won the game, but about the moment he chose to be a friend. Because sometimes the greatest victories don't happen on the field. They happen on the cold sidewalks of a city where an old dreamer finds another, and together they rewrite their story.